Hi there. My name is Dr. Erika, and on this channel, I encourage radical change to inspire far reaching impact. Now, today we're going to be reacting to the video posted by Derrick Jaxn earlier this week, talking a little bit about the infidelity that occurred in his marriage to his wife, Derrick Jaxn. But we're going to be approaching it from the perspective of a couples therapist. One of the things that I think is important before we get started to note is that this obviously is not treatment or a diagnosis of their relationship or them as individuals. I don't know them. But what I would like to say is couples seek out support through couples therapy for a number of different reasons. Some that are very much like what is going on with the Jacksons, except it's happening for them publicly. So things like infidelity, differences in presentation, or growth as a couple, all of these things might bring a couple to treatment. And one of the things that we try to work through is what's important for the couple in terms of resolution or what they're interested in working on, and detailing whether or not we'd like to move forward. So I would also say that one of the things that we'll assume is that I may or may not know information about this couple, given that Derrick Jaxn has a more social profile and presentation than his wife. I may or may not know that about them before they come into my office to work with me. And so that's kind of how I'm going to be approaching this video today. I'm going to give some observations and directions that I might take with them as a couple based on what they're bringing into session in this video. So that's how we're going to walk through. Let's get into it.
What's going on, guys? Derrick Jaxn here, and today I am joined by my lovely wife, Danae, and we just wanted to address a couple of things. We understand that some of you may have already heard, maybe not, that this chapter of our marriage is one that was preceded by a marriage that I completely failed. And I would say it just started around August, maybe September of last year. But, a lot of
So the first thing that I notice is the way that he is grasping her hands. It kind of comes off as kind of wanting to have some level of support and hanging on to kind of the support as though it might kind of pull away. It probably would be an observation that I would make if they sat down and that's the stance that they took. I'd also be curious about his statement around kind of what started 7 or 8 months ago. That would be something that I would ask about and probably ask for clarity around whether this older version of their marriage was present or whether he's talking about kind of this new start to their marriage.
has been said already about what was the cause and all that other stuff. Some of it is true, some of it is completely false. But the truth is, and I'm saying it here now, is that Derrick Jaxn was involved with other women outside the marriage. And by involved, I want to
So I'd be interested around what is true and what is completely false. Again, if I were working with them in confidence. And what I'm struck by is that he uses a third person when referring to what's going on. And those of us who are familiar or kind of with this reaction that we oftentimes have to hearing someone refer to themselves in third person, it can be really off-putting. And part of it can be to remove themselves or try to distance themselves from the situation or event that they're talking about, so that they see themselves from the outside looking in and are able to kind of have more of a compassionate view for the person, because they don't view that person as themselves. So they don't necessarily have to adopt some of the shame and humiliation that can come with that event. They can look from the outside into the event and show more compassion for the person that is in that situation. So I think it would strike me that he would use third person, and I may let him finish talking a little bit about what's going on before I would stop him and ask whether or not he takes ownership over his actions and behavior in the event.
to be clear. I'm not talking about just casually kicking it, maybe a lunch or something like that. I'm talking about as serious as sex, to sexual flirtation and meeting up and that kind of thing. And some things that otherwise may be considered okay by some in terms of like just chatting or checking on people or being checked on by people that I've had a previous encounter with. But without my wife's knowledge of it and with us having a sexual history, all of it falls under the umbrella of inappropriate, cheating.
So that's actually something that needs to be established by a couple at the start of their relationship. For some, like he indicated, chatting with an ex, even going to lunch with an ex, especially depending on what terms you're on, could be completely acceptable to your partner. What you want to establish is what is unacceptable so that you both walk away at the very beginning of your relationship with an understanding that if this happens, it constitutes cheating for me and cheating in this relationship, so that there's no ambiguity about that and everybody's on the same page. That's super important. So I probably would have them establish that now if they haven't established that following this event.
Affair, stepping out, definitely not in alignment with the vows that I took, and definitely not in alignment with the biblical standard of what it means to be faithful, which is the standard that I'm going by now. Now, I'm saying this publicly, not because I'm, married to you guys.
Sorry. So he emphasizes now. So one of the things that I would be curious about and would want to talk with him about is what standard did they establish at the start of their marriage? One of the reasons premarital counseling is so important is because you really get an idea of how are we operating? How are we moving? So that you make sure that you're moving together, or at least with the understanding that you're moving differently. So whatever a couple chooses, that's their choice. But I think it would have been important to establish at the start of the relationship what were the principles that their marriage would function under, and so that it's clear that there was a shift and a movement from that.
First and foremost, I'm accountable to God. Then I have to be accountable to my wife, in which we've already had this conversation. I've already told her literally everything. I've given her basically a roll call list. If I've said hello to a woman in the last 12 years of me knowing her, she knows about it. But now that it's been made so public, it's important that I first off let you guys know I do not stand by those actions. I don't want to encourage anybody to do that. And then secondly, I know that I cannot build a platform preaching certain things, preaching against certain things, and then in my real life live contrary to that for any amount of time or any length of time to eat.
So I think it's important that he is not referencing kind of what happened, but kind of the impact that it is having on his platform here. This is probably not the best venue for them to rehash whatever healing that they went through during this time, but it's something that I would want to know in working with them as a couple. What did that look like, especially now that it's becoming public and it's being rehashed? What determination did they come to? How did they kind of operate in that level of healing? What did they decide was the outcome? What is that going to look like moving forward? And making sure that they're now in agreement and back in alignment if their desire is to move the relationship forward, which so far it sounds like it is.
Any extent and think that I can't be held accountable. The same way that I preach, men and women in this situation need to face consequences of their actions, deserve to be held accountable. Guess what? Derrick Jaxn's no exemption. He's not exempt from that.
So that's the second time. My guess is it's going to come up again. So being someone who tends to be pretty upfront when working with couples and individuals, I probably would have stopped him and again asked whether or not he would take accountability for that behavior, because by again referring to himself in third person, he's trying to kind of step outside of the situation, and it's almost as though he sees himself as an entity like that brand that he talked a little bit about, as opposed to seeing him as the person that did those actions. The statements don't necessarily align, and so I'd want him to clarify that, not just for me so that I have that understanding, but for his partner.
I'm also not a victim. Nobody made me do this. She didn't make me or push me to do it. The next person didn't make me. No friend influenced me. It don't matter how I was raised and what trauma or whatever. Look, I made decisions. I made a series of decisions that I got to account for. There's no excuse or justification. I've already made that bed and have had to lie in it. And now we're finally getting on to the other side, personally, in our own healing, in our own marital oneness.
So at this point, I would actually want to check in with his partner. What I'm doing is I'm just observing their dynamic, and I'm tuned in to what he's saying, but I'm also tuned in to the way that she is moving. So as he made this statement in terms of the place where they're at to be moving on, she looked away, and as opposed to look towards him. And so I would actually want to pause him and check in with her and see if she is in agreement with that, so that again, I get affirmation from both of them that they're ready to move forward, and that they both agree the direction that the relationship should be taken.
And now this is being made public to you guys, so we're bringing that forth to you guys to let you know where we're at with that. But did you want to say anything?
Yes, so I do want to just add that I agree with what he just said. There is no justification for bringing other women into our marriage on any level. And it was unacceptable. And it's not something that I tolerate or that we tolerate moving forward. And when I've been flooded again with messages and these things and about, I need to leave or why haven't I left? And the answer is when I found out about it, I left. I did not hesitate or waste time to do so. And I stayed gone. No matter how many times he came, I stayed gone and stood firm on I am not coming back. And I did not come back until I seen a shift and a change in his mentality. And
So I would be curious about what that shift and change was. What was it that she was looking for? Did she outline how he could present that or what that should look like once he had made that? Did she share it to him or share it with folks that she was seeking counsel around? I'd be interested to know kind of what those markers were, because chances are that those markers may have to be referenced or come up again, and it may kind of set the tone for where they are in their relationship now. So that's something that I would want to know from her. What are the things that he had to go through? Was it just those steps? What evidence is she going to be looking for of continuation to carry that out, so that it wasn't just kind of a let me do this so that I can get home or you can come back? How is she asking for him to kind of demonstrate that ongoing in their marriage?
how he carried himself and how he presented himself and conversations that we were able to have that we had never been able to have in just 12 years of knowing each other. And when we were able to have these dialogues, said, okay, Lord, this is something that you've had your hand on. And this was with me being completely removed from his life. And him pursuing God, continuing to pursue God, and continuing to eliminate these things that led up to the catastrophe that you guys are seeing for the first time. So there's nothing out there right now that is information that.
So, one thing that I would want to confirm, especially as things continue to move forward, and one thing that I tend to do with couples is I'll have a initial meeting with them. I'll then meet with them both individually, and then we resume kind of our couples meetings from that point forward. There are no more individual meetings. But what she said in terms of kind of where things are, where things stood, that they were able to kind of settle, I'd want to confirm with him. I'd want to confirm the dates. I'd want to make sure that whatever it is that he shared with her lines up with what he shares with me, to make sure that it's not still happening. Oftentimes, the evidence that something happened and maybe is still happening just hasn't presented itself. And so, wanting to make sure that the behavior that she was looking for and that he was hoping to discontinue is actually that, and that there's nothing else that maybe needs to be discussed or needs to kind of be cleared and uncovered to be able to move forward in the way that they desire.
I don't already know about or haven't known about. And so this is not something that is new. We have moved forward from it. We have gotten counsel for it and continue to do so. He is still continuing to pursue God and continuing to seek guidance and wise counsel from men of God. And that is what I needed for the continuation of me being present in this marriage and to stand by his side. So today, where I'm at is at peace, and I proudly stand by his side, and I have no hesitation, I have no hurt, no shame about that. And it's only because of.
So, her deciding to continue to stand by him again is evidence of their conversation and where they've arrived. And for her to say that, I would want to just be able to have that conversation, maybe as part of our individual time, as how she got to that point. They talked about counsel, and from the way that they have referenced God in the time that they've spent, my guess is they're talking about religious counsel. And so I would be curious, is this the first time that they're coming to see a therapist, a relationship therapist, a couples therapist, and if their religious counsel maybe has some expertise there, because that would be something that I would expect to see, or would encourage them to consider, in addition to having counsel related to their respective faith.
The grace of God and the mercy of God. And we have already turned a new chapter in this story. We are continuing to move forward, and we are just now sharing that with you all. And I forgave him, and most importantly, God has first forgiven him, and I also forgive the others as well. And with that, we are.
So I'm not a face analyst or, kind of movement analyst expert, but two things that I honed in on were her eyes when making those statements about forgiving him. She did look at him in the eye as she started the statement and then cast down her eyes. And then same thing when she talked about forgiving the others, looking directly into the camera and then casting down her eyes. So that would be something that I would want to clarify with her. What does she recognize full forgiveness looks like? Are there things that she still holds over him? Are there things that she still asks for him, that might be evidence of not fully having forgotten? So in her heart, having forgiven, but maybe still carrying some remembrance of that. The other piece is this is being rehashed now. I don't know how long it's been since the cheating actually happened, but the fact that it's being rehashed now and being rehashed in such a public fashion has got to be overwhelming. And so part of that would be checking in with them about what the rehashing of this is going to do and the level of impact that it's going to have on their relationship where it stands now in this kind of fragile reparative state.
Are free and moving forward. So that's all I have.
Yeah. And I get it. Some of y'all, like, this may come as a huge shock, probably a huge disappointment. I let a lot of you down. If you've had a perspective shift on who Derrick is, hopefully it's away from anything remotely close to perfection, and it's simply that, I am a human, and that does not justify anything that I did. But I don't want anybody out there to be putting me on a pedestal. If you did, then I hate that you did that. Maybe I gave you cause for that, and I apologize if I did. For those who are saying, Derrick, I don't want to ever listen to you again, it's totally understandable. I appreciate you while I had your support and helping me get the message out about healing and healthy relationships to so many people who needed it, myself included. And for those who are going to continue to support, man, I appreciate you like never before, because I know it's not going to be easy going forward, it's at least for a little while so many things are still fresh and attached to my name. But for everybody out there, if you get nothing else from what I've ever said over the last 9 years or right here in this video, please get this. Nothing is right until it is right with God. Nothing works until it comes into alignment with biblical standard of how God told us to do things, especially when we're talking about a marital, spiritual covenant. Yes. You cannot do this by your own understanding, your own intelligence, your own willpower, your own values. You have to have the grace of God to break free from certain things, to stay away from certain things, to not operate from your lowest self, whatever it may be. And it's because it's really only by God's grace that we're even able to be here on this video, holding hands. Well, like a year ago, 7-8 months ago even, I couldn't see this happening. I thought it was over, and I already had begun to step.
So I definitely would want to talk with them about what has shifted, what are the things that, again, allowed for that. But their stance on kind of what is needed, I'm going to respect their beliefs. I really do think at this point I would encourage them that there may be some individual healing that they may need to do. especially depending on how they respond in the individual sessions that we might have before we resume couples counseling. I would be interested in what work they may individually be doing to make sure that they are coming to the marriage with that understanding that they both are human, that they both are healing, and you don't want to bleed out all over each other when it can be avoided. So that's one of the things that I would definitely want to encourage them around, and want to check in around as well, that they don't just have, you can have Jesus and a therapist, just FYI. And so wanting to make sure that they recognize that there may be things in addition to some of their spiritual beliefs and principles that need to be addressed, and they may need support in that outside of their church.
Establishing my relationship with God, but that's the fruit of bringing things in alignment with God. And the mess that's been made, the mess that's now being made public from last year and years past, that's a result of getting out of alignment with doing things God.
Okay, so years and years pass, and so that signals kind of a pattern, and I would definitely want to check in around the level of communication that there's been either at each time, or the impact of receiving all of this information at one time. I can only imagine the blow that would be, or kind of the slowly eroding away that would look like, if it's something that has come up time and time again, year after year. That would definitely be something that I'd want to check in around and talk about what's going to be different this time around.
God's way. So that's where I stand. That's where we stand. And again, we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you soon. Peace.
All right, and there we have it. So the last thing I would probably comment on are some of the comments that I've been seeing, or things that are said even in some other reaction videos related to like narcissism or narcissistic traits. So I am not in a position where I have treated Mr. Jaxn, or worked with him or his wife, and so I would never be in a position to make a clinical judgment like that. That'd be irresponsible. And I think there are so many things, so many factors that go into doing this work with folks. I would never make a snap judgment like that, but what do I know? I'm just a licensed psychologist. But I think that it is important that the Jaxns really focus on what they would like to do next, and really seek support and guidance, both professionally and it seems like religiously that's going to be important to them. And so I'd encourage that, and I'm definitely wishing both of them the best, and total healing and restoration in whatever that looks like for them. So if you have enjoyed this content and you'd like to see more about how psychology can walk and talk and show up in your everyday life, feel free to drop me a comment, leave me a message, and I'll see you soon. Take care.